wow, that's really great. You're sticking to 40 hours a week. I don't know a single business owner who sticks to 40 hours a week, especially being a one-man show. Like you said, if you're spending 20% of your time, though, well, we'll call it 40% for on average. If you're taking 40% of your time to do business stuff, but you need to be billable 40 hours a week, keep in mind, now you're actually working 60 hours.
You are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Fosivity, where we answer your questions and simplify information security for small businesses. Get the clarity you need to focus on the things that matter.
Hey, everybody, welcome back again. This is another episode of the Mindful Business Security Show. I am Accidental CISO here, and I am joined again with TheBlindHacker, and we're going to continue talking about how to start a business. This is the third installment of this series. So if you're just finding this one, you might go back and listen to the prior two before you jump in here, because we talk about some more foundational things before we get to this point. Today, we're going to talk about running a business. And we're going to jump into some of the things that are required to actually start running and operating your business once you get everything set up and you've got your paperwork in hand, and then you're standing there going, well, now what? So hopefully this will help answer that question of now what? So welcome, Joe. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. I formed this business. I've got a EIN. I've got an LLC. I have my protections in place. I have an operating agreement. It's just getting started.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me back again. Definitely appreciate the ability to talk about this topic. If you do take what CISO and I are saying here and go become a top 1% business performer, fantastic. Thank you. We would like our royalty checks, but ultimately, it comes down to this is just what we are doing as you know. I don't often use the term loosely, but the average Joe, as it were, right? So I think as we start to run a business and we've got the operating agreements, you're like, okay, well, what's the next thing I need? Well, any smart, savvy SBA or MBA or small business associate advocate, any master in business, bachelor of business, they're going to tell you need a business plan. And what does a business plan look like? So now you can go back to the generative chat. Oh, develop a business plan. What is a business plan? Well, it'll tell you what one is, but you've got to really to yourself develop that. Like, what do you, again, we've talked about, oh, is this your side hustle? Is this your full time? Is this you freelancing? Is this you doing this? Even if it's all those things, I still suggest, at least early on, having a business plan, even if that plan just shows make money, do things. But how are you going to make money, right? Again, I run a side business of doing a small handful of things I do well. For me, that's vulnerability management, vulnerability assessment, that's penetration testing, that's offensive security and kind of in the overarching area. But that's also a little bit of I do some ad hoc blue teaming, purple teaming. But my business plan says, what do I do and what do I do well? Well, I'm a hacker. I hack things. Period. That's a big umbrella of things. Okay, well, I can write malware for your company. I can write breach and adversarial simulations. I can do all these other things. And it goes, well, what is actually my business plan? Well, my business plan, frankly, only has, hey, I'm going to specialize. I would like to be a specific specialist in the SMB, small, medium business market, preferably small, where I can help companies really ensure that they are secure, that they have certain practices in place, and then do quarterly, yearly, whatever assessments there. Again, I like to take advantage of the whole, hey, do you have cyber insurance? No? Well, you should go get some. Okay, cool. They go get some. Oh, one of the things I need to do is a yearly pen test. Like, hey, I'll do your yearly pen test for a reasonable rate. Okay, boom, that's my business plan. How do I sell it? Well, I go to people and say, these are considerations you should have running a business in 2024. I ultimately say I can help you with those things and not be a massive expense on the company, and make sure that I meet your cybersecurity insurance or quarterly or yearly requirements, things like that.
I'm really glad that you went to the business plan stuff first in this. I think it's kind of important. There are business folks and entrepreneurs out there. Uh, if you jump into the small business subreddits and places like that, you'll see people say, basically just do it. Quit thinking about it and just go do it. Uh, but I think that tends to be rooted in the analysis paralysis that some people will get into, where they have all these thoughts and their ideas in their head, and they get sidetracked by all the planning and the amount of stuff uh, that they want to do, or some of these details, and they never actually start doing it. And I always cringe a little bit when people say, well, just go do it, because it while the advice, like, I understand kind of where they're getting at with the advice, is that you it's better to do something than nothing. uh, and sitting there dreaming, at some point you do just need to do something. But I feel like, I had a lot of stuff in my head. We talked in the very first episode of these series about sort of the why. Why am I doing this? And and what are we going to do? And I had all these ideas in my head for what it is that I wanted to do, and how I might want to do it. But it was so much that I couldn't really get it organized in a usable way just in my head. And so for me, it took just getting it brain dumped out of my head and onto paper. Uh, and originally, it started with me writing what I thought was just going to be a marketing plan for, okay, how am I going to bring this to market and get this out there? And what it ended up turning into was more of a business plan. And I think a lot of people get hung up that with the concept of a business plan having to be this like huge formal document, and it doesn't have to be. It can be something lightweight, but it really just comes down to, and the benefit to me, at least, I think the benefit to a lot of people is it gets you to put it on paper and articulate, what am I going to do? Like, who are my customers going to be? What am I going to do for them? What is the value that I'm going to create for them? Uh, those types of things. And you can also then start getting into some of the marketing of, like, where am I going to find those people? That's that sort of thing. So for me, as I went through, the what am I going to do, I was able to start sort of just outlining. And really, the business plan doesn't have to be much more than an outline, to be effective. I started outlining the service offerings that I was going to do. And I started outlining, like, what does my ideal customer look like? Uh, to be able to figure that out. And, why would they need my services? Kind of what are the business drivers for them to need me and what I do, these services that I want to provide. Because as I talked about in the first episode, like, I want to be very focused and control what I was working on, and not have to take on just any project that came along. So that was all really, really important to me as we went through. And one of the nice things about the business plan is, once you write it down, you can come back to it and revisit it later. And it's actually been useful for me to come back to, because I had some opportunities that I was considering. And I came back to my business plan, was reviewing my business plan as I was going through them. And I realized, you know what, these business opportunities that I'm considering right now don't align with my plan. They don't align with my strategy. I should not do this. Because it's going to take me in a direction that I don't want to go. And, like, reviewing the business plan reminded me, like, okay, this is the clarity that I had around what I wanted to do, and that's not it. And so I was able to decline those opportunities just simply because it wasn't a fit with what I had set out for myself to do. And I was able to kind of overcome that little, kind of excitement initially around the opportunity coming up, to realize like this is going to keep me from doing what I actually want to do.
That's interesting. That's a good way to, again, formulate. I liked what you said, the analysis process to write it down. I was actually having a conversation with my team about that today. It doesn't make you old. It doesn't make you weak. If you need to put down your ideas on literal paper or type them up, put them somewhere, get them out of your head and onto the paper. It's kind of our note here. And I think that'll allow you to analyze what you could be doing. Again, it doesn't even need to be some extraordinarily formal, well written, the best business plan on the planet. It just needs to be something that you, again, gives you enough direction, a compass, right? Even if you take a piece of paper and go north, south, east, west. But even if you're walking one direction or another direction, at least, trying to help regulate and correct what's going on. Again, if you start biting off more than you could chew, are you starting a company for streaming? Are you starting a company for playing video games? Are you starting a company for cybersecurity? Are you starting a company for penetration testing? Are you starting a company for well, those can all be absolutely separate companies. Those can all be separate entities, and I think it all boils down to marketing in your plan. What do you want to do with those companies? And that's where you start to hit that outreach level of, okay, my company really, like I said, I stay focused offensive security. I stay focused on these things. Do I have clients come to me and ask me one-off questions about the way they should rebuild Active Directory, or do I recommend a person for these things? I was like, well, yes, I can have that recommendation, but like, let's make that a separate conversation than the one we're having now, because I want to get you secure first, or help you get through your yearly requirements, and then we can have that conversation. I'll be glad to have that at the end of this. Let me see what's going on first, and okay, um, and then as you start to market yourself and build a brand, right? Like this is, it's a brand, cybersecurity. You got to build your brand as an individual. So you've got the blind hacker, you've got accidental CISO. Those are brands. Is that who we physically are? No, but is that a part of us? Yes. And so as you market and build a strategy towards, I want this to be the thing. So I say pick a very specific few topics initially. Now, if you start getting really good at those topics and your company grows, then expand. But for now, you got to start thinking, what is a good strategy to play here? What is marketing for you? What is marketing to you? What is marketing?
Yeah. I mean, I could give you the business school definition of marketing, but that's a little dry and stodgy. For me, really, marketing came down to how am I going to present my services to the world? Like, how am I going to get them in front of people? What do I want to do uh, to raise kind of awareness of my company, Fosivity? Not just advertising, letting people know that I exist, but actually doing something to, create value, define and create kind of a need and those types of things. And so, I kind of step back first as, from a marketing strategy standpoint, what is it that I want to do with my marketing? And so for those things for me, I wanted to establish credibility and trust uh, for the company. I wanted to build an audience and a professional network. I wanted to create value for clients and partners. And partners end up becoming a very big part of my strategy as we'll continue talking here. And I also want to create value in the broader business and social community because I believe very strongly that businesses don't operate in a vacuum, in isolation. They operate within a business and social community, and so businesses have stakeholders beyond just the shareholders and maybe the customers, like the employees. In my case, me as an employee, like I need to get positive value out of this beyond just a paycheck, but also just in general, like the larger community needs to get some sort of value. And I think it's where a lot of businesses miss. Uh, and they tend to take more from certain stakeholders like employees and the community than they give. And so I was really wanting to make sure that as I was looking at marketing, that I was kind of doing those things uh, and sort of choosing how I was going to do this. So I looked at, opportunities to do this. Like I can do this with some online marketing uh, through blogs and through this podcast. This very podcast was actually something I defined a year before I created it in my business plan, in that outline for what I wanted to do. Uh, and so that was helpful because then as I was actually getting ready to launch the podcast, I could go back to the business plan and try to figure out like how can I make this podcast be valuable to folks. Uh, and through social media and that sort of thing as well. How do I want Focivity to be able to do something of value through social media, uh, and then also in-person marketing because obviously everything's not online. So industry conferences and those types of things, and I looked at. Sort of came up with some requirements for like the types of conferences that I would want to sponsor, those types of things. But I also looked at defining industry specific conferences for like small businesses, maybe like a um, real estate agent specific conference or something like that potentially Facility would go and present at those. Like that would be something inbounds for my plan. IT and information security conferences. Again, I had some stuff in there for things that I would do around industry conferences as well. And I also, as I was going through that, highlighted some things about those conferences that were important to me for the types of conferences that I would want to participate in or sponsor. Um, and so, I was able to document those, things like, the size of the conference, but also some things that are more uh, on the ethical side, like that the conference, pays speakers fair market rates or things like that. Depending on other other things, obviously, whether the attendees are paying or not, or something like that too. So that's that kind of the stuff I went into. Advertising, I put into my plan as well as basically something that I might consider if there is enough of a return, on investment on those things. But in general, based on the way I put that in there, I felt like just plain advertising was probably not going to be a win. It was probably going to generate a
Hmm.
lot of really uh, low quality leads and that sort of thing. And I didn't want to waste time dealing with low quality leads on those types of things. But uh, yeah, I don't know. As you were going through, did you think about marketing strategy a whole lot?
I went the online brand route. I market myself as the blind hacker. And ultimately it probably could have been, Blind Hacker LLC. But I kind of put when people come to me and say, "Hey, I want you." Like I was like, I can go, "Hey, here's my full time job," and people are like, "Okay, that's great, but no, I want you." I'm like, "Okay, you can come to me, ultimately, and that's fine, and I'll do these things." And um, it became okay, cool. Like let's build out a relationship here, like you said, marketing strategy. So I kind of relied a lot on me. So I really, again, it's a brand thing. I get folks interested through my several avenues, again, through mentoring, through being a name at conferences, through being a person. Social media, again, very big. I'm not on like the younger folk platforms like Instagram, which could be a total miss. I built, pages, and I've done some of the ads through that. But like you said, I kind of agree with you. The folks that I've had respond to those often, to have made a sell through one of those avenues is rare. Maybe one every 2 or 3 years. For me, again, I'm keeping my stuff to. I don't build a big presence because I'm also right now. This isn't my. This is me taking my dip in. This is me making money mostly again for lack of better terms side jobs. Though I run it like a full business, I still have the insurances, I still have everything else. But that's also because I'm cautionary and I do enough work a year that I can justify those things, right? We've talked about all those things. So one day, will it be my main source of income? Sure, maybe if companies I'm at things don't work out, or growth changes, or I want to semi-retire. Um, and I put enough money in the bank, and I hit a certain age that I can pull from certain categorically things. Yeah, but at that point, my marketing strategy will change, right? My strategy now will be, let me focus on getting the quick and easy jobs from the big companies, or my focus will be, hey, other partners, hey, other people in this same situation. I see, again, you and I have a relationship now. I could go, hey, Next Gen Red Team would like to partner with Vocivity and do those things. That to me is still a good marketing strategy, because now my marketing is, oh, I've heard businesses, we don't do businesses directly to anyone, we only do them through our partners. I'm like, I think it's weird. But then you sit down with them and they always have a reason. You're like, okay, I see now. You provide such a, again, small focal area of an industry, and you do it really well, so you want to focus on having less marketing and strategy, but you want to get the sales. So you start to go, okay, let me you build out these materials for your partners and say, white label me. I will be Focivity's cyber arm. I will be um, white label cyber arm, or red team arm, or whatever. Like, this is our elite red team. They don't need to know that it's a whole other company, right? I've seen other folks do similar things where it's you start thinking back to the way some of the very big companies are built now. So you look at Spider Labs, Palo Alto's Unit 42. Those all started off, those things they've acquired. Those were other companies, and so even if Facility CyberArm, I can come to you and say, yeah, I'm only doing exclusively work through and for you, but I still want to remain independent enough that I have that control over my capability, my company, but people will pay that way. But from a marketing perspective, well, how do you pitch that? Where do you go with that? Um, I think again that just becomes down to, well, I'd rather market to Focivity, I'd rather market to Bob's Hacker Warehouse, I'd rather market to those folks, and have them. I want to be the Mindful Business Podcast, just CyberArm, right? So as you start to focus on that, you don't go to. I'm not looking for clients now. I'm looking for partners, and that marketing material still becomes important because I need to provide that to you, so then you can go out and help sell that work, right? So I think as you start to really build moving into the sales capability and pipeline, it's, you start figuring out that's the way that I want to market. And it's also a little bit easier for me because, and this goes to the whole, like, I'm still starting it. Maybe I don't want to build a massive pipeline or have massive amount of people contacting me. Maybe they go to you, but now we both get on calls and we both try to sell them on the things we do, right? So again, that's just that is a total strategy that I would. That's what I do right now, actually. So that's how I focused on it. Is I'd rather partner with folks. So I white label a lot more than I probably should. So am I that elite because nobody's ever heard of me, but I do X dollars a year? I don't put that kind of stuff in marketing material. I think it's a little cheesy. It's not me. That's not the kind of uh, uh, beat I march to. But when asked, can I provide a literal list of documents, CISOs, division leads, and other companies, CEOs that I have worked with and for, to go, hey, look, I have a literal pile of recommendations. That's, to me, that's my marketing, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's the best marketing, but it's working for me.
It sounds very familiar because I ended up settling in the same sort of thing because going direct sales is very time consuming. You talk to folks in sales and people, well, it's a numbers game, and you
Hmm.
sales guys, hear phrases like, smiling and dialing, it's just one call after another, one email after another. And I don't want to waste that kind of time. I want to do good work. And with focusing on small business, there are so many small businesses out there to potentially be able to do work for. You want to get in front of the ones that you don't have to waste your time convincing them that this stuff's important. You want to get in the front of the ones that have already identified that need, that business driver for why we need to build a security program, why we need to do whatever this need is for the service that I offer. Uh, and like you said, when you're working with partners, those partners already have clients. And when those partners have clients that they have conversations with and they identify a need, it's fantastic because if a managed service provider already has a client that they're already doing some IT service work for, and the client's talking to them and saying, "Man, our customers are asking us for SOC 2 to get, have a SOC 2 audit done, and we don't even know where to start." Well, now they've got a business driver. The customer is asking for something. They know they need help with this. It's important to their business. I don't have to convince them of that. And that partner, because I've built that trust and that relationship with them, can say, "Oh, you know what? We know who you should talk to.
Yes.
This is
Yep.
not going to be a big deal. You got to go, uh, talk to AC, and he'll get you fixed up." Or
Yeah.
folks that do penetration tests. Somebody does a penetration test for a client, and they're talking to the client during the report readout, and they realize that that client doesn't have a security program that has the processes and the capabilities to actually do anything with the information they're giving them, to the point like where their recommendations with the pen test kind of are like, "Yo, you really ought to build a security program." But they can at that point be like, "We've got somebody that you should talk to." Uh, because then when those introductions are made, like there's already a need identified, there's already some level of trust there as well. And I'm not wasting my time trying to sell to somebody, convincing them that it's important. At that
Yeah.
point, I'm just convincing them that, like, giving them the confidence.
I'm the
It's not really
guy.
convincing anything.
Yeah.
I'm just purely there to give them the confidence that this is not a big deal, and we got this. And so I think that has really been helpful with sales. So I've been able to be relatively successful with sales since I launched, because I'm not spending a huge amount of time doing sales activities, like nowhere near what uh, other firms would do. And the close rate on my sales activities is also, I think, a lot higher than probably what I hear from other folks in sales with the smiling and dialing and stuff, like numbers game. It's not so bad. So I completely agree. Like, building relationships is a huge part, especially with cyber marketing. But I think any other business too, if you can have some sort of like affiliate program or something, so you're not spending all your time doing direct sales. And that's not to say don't do direct sales. Like, if direct sales come up as a option, uh, and an opportunity comes up there, like, absolutely go direct and help that
Yes.
customer, that client. Um,
Yeah.
but one thing, though, that also was really important that I've learned in the last several years of doing this is I've got to be able to help. And you alluded to this in your comment. I've got to be able to help those partners understand how to position and sell my services. So I created some marketing materials knowing that they needed to have something at their fingertips that they could either use internally to help like kind of train their people to know, hey, this is an offering I can go sell, or even to give all the way to a client potentially uh, as well. And so some of those marketing materials that I built some one pager sell sheets uh,
Yep.
for the key products or key services, I should say, that I want to lead with. So, for example, in my business, I want to lead with uh, security assessments. I don't want to lead with policy work or process documentation uh, because it's very hard to scope those if I haven't done an assessment first. And in order
Yep.
to scope building their program of what policies they need and how much work that's going to be, I have to do an awful lot of free consulting disguised as sales to get there. But if I lead with an assessment, I don't have to do that. I can get paid to do a lot of
Right.
that discovery work, but also give them then really good recommendations on what they need to do that's specific to their business. So these sell sheets are for those key things that I want to lead with, assessments and just the pure hourly advisory services that also doesn't need to be scoped. Um, and those sell sheets being all compressed into one page has to be very succinct. What is this service? What does it do? Like, what's the value that you get out of it? Why should you want it? Like, that's really all that's there. And then I had a designer lay it out. I wrote some copy and I handed off to a designer, and they did a very professional looking uh, sell sheet for me, for instance. And I did the same thing. I created kind of a pitch deck, slide deck that I could use primarily for sharing with new partners to discuss what are the services that I offer and kind of cover for that new partner. What does Facility do? What are my strengths? Why should they choose me? Why should a client choose me? Here's the services that I offer and paint that picture so that they understand, all of that. And again, tried to keep it very, short and succinct. I didn't, want something that was going to take, an hour to go through. It's something that, I can go through in 10 minutes. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I also had a consultant bio created. It's not exactly a resume, but it's a very, very high level thing that basically a partner could hand to a client and say, here's some information about the guy that we're going to have you talk to, just to kind of set the stage so that they can get a little bit of idea about my background and expertise before the conversation. And like those marketing materials, having those at my fingertips and that became my marketing kit. And so having that at my fingertips now, when I'm talking to a new channel partner, I've got this in a zip file that I can immediately send to them, and we can talk about on the phone as we go through. So not only does it make me look very, very prepared, but it also helps me succinctly articulate what I do. And that's been really important because I found that if I can't tell the partner clearly what I do, they're not going
Hmm.
to bring me good leads. Uh, and that's going to be a problem. Now I'm going to waste time dealing with maybe leads that aren't a fit, or maybe the customer is not really understanding what it is that I do and don't do, and those types of things.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right there. It's funny. Again, I talk about my multiple stages of companies and learning. The very first time I started a company, Next Frontier Technology, I was asked, elevator pitch me, and it was 30-minute explanation of here, there. It's also a mixture of my ADHD and like, oh, I could do anything. What do you want me to do? But now that that was, you know, 12, 13 years ago. Now I get to go, no, I want to specialize in this one thing. Again, people come to me say, hey, do you do, detection engineering or, I can, but really you should have a MSSP or a SOC. Do you have that? No. Okay. Well, like you said, that's why I was saying earlier, I wait until let's do the assessment first, and then on the out brief, I'll tell you what I think you need. And okay, they come to me, hey, you know what? I did this assessment. I did a pen test, um, a standard pen test, breach and adversary kind of thing. I said, put my box on your network. They put my little Dropbox on the network. I did the whole vulnerability scan, the assessment. They didn't detect anything. They never stopped me. Maybe I pwned everything. Okay, that's really great for me. It feels great. Now I got to write this report. But then I go, from a business perspective, I need to, because the CEO, the CISO, the director, somebody's going to go, hey, how do I fix these things? And you go, whoa, well, you just stand up a SOC, get a whole program. No, I could go, well, let me see. I can hook you up with this MSSP. I am partnered with them. I do, it's a channel partner. I'm going to give them the direct sell. Here's their number. I'm going to get them. If you would like me to get them on the next call, I can do the softer introduction rather than you coming to them out of the blue. And then we can say, once we get some things signed with them, I can share the results of this pen test and go, this is where I see some weaknesses. Oh, but I also recommend getting a vCISO, somebody, maybe they don't have a CISO, maybe it's just a CEO and a director, or a CEO and a CIO. And you're like, no, I think you guys need someone who's really focused on the security thing, especially since you guys handle X, and this is Y. And being able to, I think, branch that out, make sure that it makes sense to them and they understand why I'm saying those things. And then I, like you said, I start pitching my, uh, I start pitching all that stuff, and it goes well. And okay, now I'm, like you said, now I've set up this channel partnership, or I've given it to them directly, and then we go, fantastic. This is not a problem.
As the leads come in, because once you've started getting leads through these different sort of
Yep.
marketing things, and your direct sales activities, and your social media stuff, and the
Yeah.
partners now that you've built relationships with, you got to track that somehow. And that's where you hear the term sales pipeline. And you get an opportunity that comes in, but there's this kind of life cycle of an opportunity as well, that you've got to go through, uh, when you're running your business. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but you'll want to do something to track this sales pipeline, because very quickly you're going to realize when you've got 8, 10, 15 opportunities that people have talked to you about. Now, all of them are not going to close. If out of 10 different opportunities that come along, if you close 2 or 3 or 4 of those, I mean, you're doing really pretty well, because not every opportunity is going to be a good fit. So for me, like, I just created a Trello board. You could do this with
Yeah.
Excel. You could do, all sorts of tools, like um, there's any number of tools you can use to track these things, but Trello is just an easy tool for me. It mostly stays out of my way. Uh, but I basically put a card on my Trello board when a new lead comes in, and then I move it through columns to kind of track its status. So I go from lead to contacted. I move that card into the contacted column. Once I've actually contacted that client, or that partner, and talked about that lead a little bit, and then I move it to a scoping column, uh, to represent that particular lead. Now I'm in the phase where I'm gathering information to be able to put together a proposal. And to do that, generally, I have to talk to the client. Very rarely can I put together a proposal just by talking to a channel partner. I always want to talk to the client to get from their mouth what they're thinking,
Fair.
how they're feeling, what they're worried about, those types of things, because that business context and that personal context is important. And then once I've gathered that information, I'll move that to a proposal column as I'm building a proposal. And then if the client decides that, they want to see a statement of work, then I'll move from proposal to putting together the contract, and then move it to a one column, pending kickoff. And then once we actually kick off, I move it to an active column, just to keep track of where things are. And then I've also got some columns as well for lost. Things were basically, they came back and they said, no, we're going to go in another direction, and also ghosted, because it's not uncommon that, eventually a client just may not return emails and just kind of disappears. So I got a column for that just to keep track. And generally I reset my board uh, in January each year. And I can go back and look at then one lost and ghosted, those cards in there, and get a feel for what was my close rate like. How many did I get ghosted? Did I get ghosted a lot through certain partners? Like, is there things that I might want to do to help with that? There's a lot of this stuff that this tracking can help me with. Uh, but that's, just kind of what I do to keep track of those leads in my sales pipeline, um, as we're going through it. Because the last thing you want to do is generate leads and then forget about them, or lose them somehow and not follow through, because those partners aren't going to come back to you in the future if they bring you something and you end up dropping the ball, and not following through there. So I think that's a really important piece of that. Uh, and something I should mention too, in the scoping section, when I have conversations with clients during that, I've created sort of a uh, discovery template that I use, just a quick Word doc that keeps me from forgetting kind of the questions that I want to ask. And I don't have to ask all of them as I go through, but it helps me to just take notes during that conversation, uh, and also make sure that I'm remembering to ask the stuff that I know that I'm going to need to know to get that context to put together a proposal, because I don't want to finish the conversation and then send them an email and say, "Oh, I forgot to ask these two questions," you know, and then ask them via email or something else. So that's, I think, something that is worth noting, that if, as you're looking at building your sales process, having some sort of an internal tool for yourself to help make the scoping process easier is definitely useful.
That's I haven't done that. I'll be honest. Now that you said that, I probably could go back and I kept a Trello board as well. They're incredibly easy to use, and you can make them complicated or simple. And the benefit is, when I do send out a proposal and certain client deliverables and things, they get attached there and they stay there, and I can reference them again for a certain period of time and have access to some of that stuff. But making the sales pipeline essentially more efficient. And again, it's been well enough for me. But again, if this is something that I'm going to make my full time job, I really would need to do that. Especially since, again, I don't have project managers. I don't have a professional CEO at my behest. I don't have uh, these other things that could really help me be successful. So it's really good to see that.
And it's also important to reiterate here that, like, as somebody who's self-employed, if you're looking at building a business that is just going to be you, either as a side hustle or purposefully staying small, the way that I am. Um, and if you're interested, there is a book called Company of One, and I forget who it is by, uh, off the top of my head, but it was a phenomenal book for me. I read it as I was starting the business, and it confirmed a lot of stuff for me, that, like, I am on the right track. And a lot of the things that I was already thinking about, it talked about. And it was really helpful for me to kind of help my confidence in that. But as you're putting together these processes as a one person business, making sure it's lightweight, like, you don't want to build processes that you have to maintain. Uh,
Yes.
so that's why Trello, for instance, just works well for me, because it's no more than some cards, and I can drag this thing across the board, and I can look at it for 2 minutes, every week or two, or as things develop with leads. And it helps keep me from forgetting those leads, and helps me follow up on whatever I need to follow up on, and not forget stuff. Uh, so kind of like when you're a kid and you have a dream that, you forgot to go to school or whatever. Like, sometimes I, like,
Yeah.
have this all of a sudden fear, like, oh shoot, do I have a job that I'm supposed to be working on that I completely forgot? Like, I didn't do my homework. Like, and I can go to that board and confirm, like, no, I don't have any clients that I've forgotten about. And I know that sounds really silly, but maybe it's the ADHD, for me. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like it gives me confidence that I can look at that as I'm planning each week and make sure that I'm not shorting one client over another, or worse, allowing one client to monopolize my time when I
Yeah.
have other stuff that needs to be done.
And that's I'll kind of slide into our next topic, and that's where, again, as you're building that, that's where also the idea of building and estimating and building rates and kind of fixing your projects come from that direction too, right? Especially as you've built the pipeline, you get the folks on the call, you send them a proposal, and as you're building a proposal, you've got to go, well, this is going to cost this much, and not that you should ever prioritize anyone paying more over another person, but there are folks that you say, hey, you know what? If you're paying for my diamond, premium, platinum, gold star service, that allows me, if somebody pays for a 24-hour turnaround or 24-hour service, you got to figure that out. But first things first, you got to develop the idea of, I guess, estimations and rates, right? And that this is a spot you and I talked about when we first started building these, the idea for the podcast, that uh, that gets interesting, especially since, again, you're running this is your full time job. You pay yourself a static salary. You pay your taxes out through that, and then you go from there. Me, I do have what I would consider a rate sheet. I gather information from, and this is also, like you just said, I try to go directly to the client or through my partner and say, they're doing a pen test. All right, pen test is easy. You told them what a pen test is, what we consider a pen test. Yes, they've agreed to that. Yes, okay. How many systems do they have? And based on how many systems they have, I have a little spreadsheet that says it's going to take about this many hours. Is it a hundred systems? Is it 1,000 systems? Is it 10,000, 5,000 systems? Is it 10,000 systems? Am I also doing a vulnerability assessment? Then I hit a checkbox, and then all it does is takes, plus 14% here and this, that, the other, and it just builds out this capability. When folks ask me, like, oh, what is your hourly rate, that gets tough to say. Well, it's like, well, I know that a pen test takes this amount of hours on this amount of machines, so I don't know why is the hourly rate important. Now, I do charge an hourly rate. Again, if I'm going to go back and build, you want a specific cut of, to see if your network is vulnerable to a specific type of malware or red team operations or things like that. Those can get expensive. And because, though, I am charging that hourly rate because, I've tried to express that. And so when folks are like, well, is that your rate for everything? Like, no, it's different rates. And again, since I do have people that I partner with, that comes down to, do you want to do fixed price or time? And if I try to do it and build it out in a way that I'm spending the least amount of time, because that's now great overhead for me. So now that does allow me to lower my average hourly rate because I still have an income coming in. But what does that mean? Well, again, I'm running my show, but if I do partner with somebody and I do bring in a junior, mid-level, senior, junior, mid-level person, their rates are different. But I tell, my guys know their rates up front. They're going to get, hey, I have a job. You're going to get paid X dollars per hour up to this number of hours. So ultimately, it's fixed, sort of a fixed price from that perspective. And I always try to deliver to the client a fixed price, because not many people, by the way, agree to T&M. You know, I haven't had many people agree to that. But now I need to know, if I do work 10 hours and charge $100 an hour, and then I get my $1,000, but suddenly I work 18 hours, well, or 20 hours, now I've only made $50 an hour. Oof, that's rough. Can I still pay myself? Again, I don't pay myself a static salary, but could you still pay yourself 60K a year off $50 an hour? Well, technically, yes, because $50 an hour works out to 100K a year if it's full time. But again, how many of those hours did you put into sales? How many of those hours, all those pre-calls that you didn't get paid for, right?
Yeah. And, that's one of those things that is sort of true, and you see this in other fields as well. Uh, my wife is an artist, and I've seen folks in like photography business and that kind of stuff also, talk about this realization when they start their businesses is that when you start a business that does something professionally, part of your time is running the business. The other part of your time is doing the thing your company does. And depending on the business, that could be 50% of your time is spent on business administration, overhead, sales, marketing, accounting, whatever. And maybe only half of your time is spent actually doing billable work for clients.
Yep.
Uh, and maybe that could be as low as 25%. Maybe you're spending 75% of your time doing this. And I've heard like photographers talk about, theirs is more like a 25-75 in some of the podcasts I've listened
Yeah.
to. Uh, where they're on site shooting and actually taking pictures and that kind of stuff is like 25% of their time, and the rest of it is doing everything else with running the business, or and because the photo shoots and that kind of stuff ends up being just such a short thing. uh, I was glad to hear you talk about okay, average rates, variable rates, those types of things, fixed price versus hourly, because
Yep.
I've also learned to kind of do that and look at it that way as well. Uh, I have a standard like hourly rate, for time and materials, pure just consulting, uh,
Hmm.
and then I have a lower rate that I use for fixed price
Hmm.
projects. I don't do different rates for different types of work. Like I don't charge one rate
Try
for
not
doing
to.
a meeting or a workshop and another rate for doing maybe an analysis or writing a policy or a
Right.
report or something. I don't get to that level of like different rates there. But in general, for a fixed price project versus pure hourly, I do charge a little bit lower rate. And the way I look at it is a fixed price project is a little bit less risk for me, because with a pure hourly consulting uh, advisory contract, I never know when the client's going to need something. And those are generally written as, you know, 1 to 5 hours a week. And maybe there's some caps to
Hmm.
keep it from running away with too many hours, in a given week or given month or something like that. But I never know when they're going to need something. So it makes it difficult to plan my week and my deliverables for other clients when all of a sudden something hourly could pop up and they need something turned around. And I also aim to
Correct.
provide a good level of service. Like I don't want to have something come up and say, well, I'll have to do that and get it to you in 2 weeks. As well. And so I'm very specific that certain kinds of work I only do as fixed price projects. Most of my work, I heavily prefer fixed price projects, because then I know exactly what I need to do, what I need to deliver, when I need to deliver it across multiple clients. And now I can interleave that work and plan my week. So, from my perspective, I can be a lot more efficient if I plan out and do fixed price projects. And I try to do as little as I can hourly. And the hourly stuff is more just purely for strategy, questions, just little things that pop up here and there to try to keep that minimized with clients. And by also doing that, I can explain to clients then when I give them a proposal, a fixed price proposal, they're protected from price overruns. They know exactly what it's going to cost, what they're going to get, when they're going to get it. And we can talk about the value of that project. And we don't have to get into, well, what's my rate? What's my time worth? That kind of stuff. So I don't expose the hourly rate for fixed price projects to clients. I only give them the client, the project price. For the advisory stuff, I do have my regular rate, but there are discounts because I want to stay accessible to small businesses, discounts that I apply for businesses based on size. So 1 to
Hmm.
10
Hmm.
person company is going to get a bigger discount off of that than maybe a 10 to 20 person company. But they're still going to get a discount as well. Once we get over, 20 people, that's when it starts being just the standard size. But then also built into that is a 20% margin for the channel partner who brought me the project as a commission for them. So what I take home uh, on a project, through a partner, already has their commission taken out of it. Uh, and then all the rest of the business expenses and that kind of stuff. But one of the biggest questions, though, that I get, and you may get this too, is like, well, how do I figure out what my rate should be? Like, that's, something people struggle with. And then when they get to a point where like the rate that they think is reasonable, it's easy to make mistakes and undercharge as well. And it's easy to
Hmm.
feel like
Hmm.
when you are charging a true market rate that, oh, that's too much. Um, so I'm curious, Joe, what advice do you have for folks when they're calculating their market rate, or at least, ways to approach that?
I've asked friends before, what are they making? You got to also think about like, hey, if your day job that you're trying to replace is six figures, that's 100K a year. Like I said, that's about estimated to $50-ish an hour. But keep in mind, they also pay for your health insurance. What's that? 14. We'll call it 14 to $20,000 a year. So it's really your total comp is a special magic number that many people don't know. I don't know what my total comp is for my company, for my 9 to 5, as it were. But ultimately, you start adding these things up. Okay, well then they also put X amount of dollars in your 401k, and if you're trying to again transition into this period of, oh well, gosh, about $50 an hour is so great, and I get to keep it. Well, let's again, if you're only bringing in six figures and that's what your day job is, but then now you got a minus 20 thousand out of that. That's or for your house, so it's really 80,000. Oh man, that's a little bit lower than I wanted. Well, by the way, there's these other things called expenses. We talked about the tax and expenses implications. Are you hosting your emails? Are you paying electricity? Are you doing this? Are you looking for those write-offs? Write-offs are great, but guess what? You have to pay those first, or with that money. All right, so now you're down the 60,000. So when somebody comes to me and says, "Well, is $100 an hour reasonable?" You're like, "Well, let's think about that. Now you're making 200K, again, 1099 cash a year for your small business. That's not bad. But now you minus that 40K. Now you're making 160. Well, that's more than you were making before. That's there. But oh, by the way, did you want to pay yourself 160K? Like you said, you have picked a number. You said I pay. This is my actual salary for purposes of legal reasons, this is my salary. This is enough that I can qualify for these loans. It's enough that I don't pay for a crazy amount of taxes on some of that, that this way, that way. So you've said my personal liability for taxes, I want to be X dollars. Okay, well, you can pay yourself 60,000 a year off of your $200 an hour. But by the way, like you said though, or like we've alluded to here, keep in mind now that's not that 160K coming home to you like so great, fantastic. How if you're working 2,000 hours a year, I'm just rounding it down instead of the 2,080. Wow, that's really great. You're sticking to 40 hours a week. I don't know a single business owner who sticks to 40 hours a week, especially being a one man show. Like you said, if you're spending 20% of your time, though, well, we'll call it 40% for on average. We'll take the 75, we'll take the 20. If you're taking 40% of your time to do business stuff, but you need to be billable 40 hours a week or you're doing a full week's worth of work billable, keep in mind now you're actually working 60 hours. So then you start going, I'm not getting paid for those hours. So then you take your salary, your 2,000 billable hours a year. Now it's actually closer to but you're working. I can't do the silly math out of the top of my head. We'll call it 2,400 hours a year. You're actually working that much, but you've only billed 160. Now take that 160K divided by your actual take home divided by your 2,400 hours. That's no longer $100 an hour. That's a significantly lower number. You have to add in all that stuff. So when I start trying to negotiate with some of the folks that have come to me and recently asked, what should I be charging? And it's like, well, first, the first thing is as much as you can. But by the way, like you said, I don't want to turn away small business customers. So I do the discounts too. So maybe instead of it being 4,000, it's actually 8,000. And then what do? I minus, I minus 13% no matter what. Like, even if you're a big company, if I put a price out there, I minus either it's actually 9 or 13%. Why did I choose those numbers? Because then my balance, and I learned this from another small business owner, because then my balance isn't, if I charge you 10, that's a $10,000 job. People actually don't like to see $10,000. Oh my God, that's a lot of money. All right. But guess what? I'm giving you a 9% discount. And that, by the way, I don't even publish the 9% discount. I don't go, hey, here's your 9% discount. I just know my hourly time and I go $10,000 minus 9%. So now we're not looking at minus $1,000. We're minus $900, right? And if I'm doing my math right, the reason why is now, this not 1999.99, all the sites around the 1999.99 is much. People would prefer to pay 1999.99 than $20, right? This whole, oh, I can afford not $20, so let me do that, right? So, $10,000. Now you're getting a $9,100 bill for a pen test, right? Some folks have come back to me like, I can't afford that, and I go, even the $9,100. I'm like, what can you afford? Like, come to me with a real price. I know this is further down in our notes here, AC, but this is the whole like negotiations, right? This is kind of alluding to our negotiations tactic. We have this whole area like negotiations. Well, if they go, well, I can afford $500, you're like, well, I can't work for $500. You have to find a real budget and a reasonable price, and then that's sometimes when you walk away. Don't just do the job because you need the job. And then I go, and then I love this word. I again learned this from another small business owner. One time courtesy discount. You know what? You do this work with me, I give you a one time. If you sign right now, today on this phone, and then you get my statement of work, and then in the next before I start the work, we get the 25% or 50% or 30%, whatever number you take. I always take 25% minimum. Um, to start doing work, and you do that right now, I will give you a one-time courtesy of another $900 off. Right? Boom.
And I think the big takeaway, like I think it's fantastic for uh, folks to be able to hear like the types of things that go into pricing and how complicated that really is,
Oh yeah.
and
Sorry.
which is why I never want to have the conversation with the client about why my rates are what they are, uh, because it's a conversation that it just can't it's a no-win conversation. Like, it opens
Absolutely.
the door to have somebody, either nag on you and tell you you're not worth what you charge, or to nitpick about, well, that cost or this cost is irrelevant here or there. And so for me at least, I never expose any of that stuff. And the real takeaway um, here also is what you were getting at with the negotiations is you negotiate on scope rather
Mm-hmm.
than rate. If they can't afford something, we back up and say, okay, what can you afford? And you can have a conversation then around maybe what parts of the project the client can shoulder, so that there's less that you have to do as the consultant, or as a service provider, and maybe they do more. Maybe you just guide more on certain areas and their people do things, and then other stuff that's more high value, like you focus on, okay, what are their specific pain points? What are the highest value things that I'm doing that they can't do? Those are the things we can't get rid of. but going back and adjusting scope is, the kind of the way to negotiate on these and
Hmm. Hmm.
avoid giving discounts beyond the standard discounts. And obviously you can't negotiate if you're not willing to walk away. And so that's one of the things that I've had to get comfortable with is telling
Be
people,
prepared to walk away.
once
Yeah.
if we've tried, I give them a proposal, we scale back the proposal a little bit, we have a conversation, they still can't afford it, maybe I'm not a fit.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
maybe I realize like what they really need is what somebody else does. Maybe I refer them to somebody else who does that specific thing. If it's something that I don't do uh, as well, because maybe in these conversations you realize that what they need isn't what I do. They don't need me. They need somebody else. Um,
Yep.
so that's always a possibility there. Uh, for coming up with rates, maybe to kind of summarize, because you hit on a lot of the things that I generally advise folks when they're trying to come up with their rates. And sort of my rule of thumb, you can go talk to other consulting firms who do similar things that you do and find out like what are their rates. But then with all the negotiations and that kind of stuff that happen and all the other kind of calculations and things that go on, it's hard to know for sure and match one company to another. Uh, but that's one way you can do it and say, well, other consulting companies similar to me are charging this, that's market rate, so that's what I'm going to charge. uh,
Yep.
and that's a totally valid way to go about it. I think a lot of folks that are looking at side hustle to then turn into a full-time gig may approach it a little bit differently. And the way that you explained, what would this job or this role be as a full-time employee? What's a average salary for that in my area or whatever, like you can find that information, and people
Yep.
generally, if they're already working in that kind of role, already have a good feel for, okay, what's you know fair compensation for as a full-time employee for this. uh, so you can convert that full-time salary to hourly, divide by
Yep.
2,000 hours a year, and now you have that hourly rate, like you said, before, 100K salary divided by 2,000 hours a year is $50 an hour. Uh, and then you add in, the rule of thumb that I like to advise is, multiply that by 1.5, 1.5.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
so now, that bumps up to cover your taxes and insurance and that kind of stuff, like you said. But the last piece of that a lot of folks forget is that business overhead that you were talking about. And usually what I advise folks is, if they're doing it as a side hustle, take that new number that you have and multiply by, like, 1.25, just to add in some extra business overhead stuff to cover some sales time and that sort of thing, maybe to cover some of your tools and your web hosting and your email and that kind of stuff, those other business expenses.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
you get to where you're doing it as a full-time gig, you really have to multiply that in that last step. Instead of 1.25, like, you got to almost go to like 1.5, maybe even 2 on there
Yep.
when it's your full-time gig, because now you got to cover all of your business expenses. Because remember, we talked about stuff earlier, your company's PO box and all the tools and software that you have and all your marketing expenses. And if you sponsor conferences or whatever you do, all of that comes out of it. You're not keeping that there. So as a side hustle, for instance, 100K divided by 2,000 is $50 an hour, multiply times 1.5 to compensate for the taxes and insurance. So now you're at $75 an hour. Now, if this
Yep.
is like just a part-time consulting thing, maybe that rule of thumb, the 1.25, that's going to push you up to 93.75.
Yep.
Kind of a weird round number. So maybe round that up to like, $95 an hour or something, or what
Yep.
have you. But like, if you're doing this as a full-time gig, maybe you got to multiply that times 2. So, now you're a whole lot closer to $200 an hour at least, uh, in there. So it definitely adds up very quickly. And, you just got to figure out, what do you need to live? Going back to the first episode, we were talking about, like, what's my number? What do I have to make to pay the bills and those sort of things? And so one of the other things we were talking about earlier was, you put together the proposal for somebody, and what does that proposal look like? For me, I've got a proposal template that I created in PowerPoint, because it's easy to put together PowerPoint slides, because I try to templatize things as much as I can, to make things fast and reusable. Uh, so that's just one of those things that I've done for myself, is I've got this proposal template that makes it really easy to go through and put together a proposal, and I don't have to mess around with anything else that's also it goes into my statement of work, that's a little more time consuming to put together. Uh, but in my proposal deck, I capture the business objective. First slide, you know, what, who's the business? What's their problem that we're trying to solve? What do they need? Uh, and why are we here? Kind of stuff. Uh, the next slide then generally gets to, what is it that I'm going to do for them? Uh, at a high level. I may describe the assessment at a very high level of the specific assessment that I'm recommending for them. Um, and talk a little bit about the framework or whatever. If I've recommended a NIST assessment, for instance, I might talk a little bit about that, why that's the recommendation. And then, but I try to keep that very short. And then we jump straight to, specifically, what are we going to do? And then I look at deliverables. What are they going to get? And then the last slide, basically it's, step through 5 slides here. What's it going to cost and how long is it going to take? And from there, we can now have the rest of the conversation. But it's very focused and to the point. But it's also in a format that's very easy to edit. So if we have to go back and edit the scope of the project or something, I can go back and edit these slides based on, the what I'm going to do, what they're going to get, very, very easily, as we negotiate back and forth. And then when they're ready, okay, now send me your statement of work. Then I can send them my statement of work. And the statement of work has some additional stuff in it. For me, generally, that's my contract. So it's got some terms and conditions and that kind of stuff in it. The statement of work largely takes some of the content from the proposal, pull it, copies and paste it over, but there's some new content in the statement of work. There's a little more detailed description uh, of what it is that we're going to do in the project and the value, as well as a breakdown of the timeline of the project and, payment milestones, if there's payment milestones and those types of things. That all goes into the statement of work as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
And that's why I do the proposal first, and we get that finalized before I start doing all that other stuff, because that stuff takes a little more time to prep, and I don't want to keep changing those over and over again in the statement of work. So when I'm going direct, generally the statement of work is all that I need because it's structured like a contract. I have found that some channel partners will prefer to have a master services agreement first. And
Correct.
so we'll have a contract between me and the channel partner that outlines our working relationship as channel partners, payment terms, those types of things, intellectual property. Like, we can hit all the contract stuff so that when we do the statements of work in the future, if my statements of work are going to be direct to the partner, and then the partner does their own contract with the client, now I can do a more simple statement of work that only outlines the details of that particular project, and we don't have to have all the terms and conditions and contract stuff. So it can streamline things. Different clients, different channel partners may work differently, but I wanted to call that out, that it's not uncommon to need with a channel partner to do a master service agreement, MSA, initially, and then the statements of work just go under that. Uh, or other times you can do contracts, statements of work to function as the contract goes straight through to the channel partner or straight to the client. I do some where channel partners make a referral or they make an introduction, but then I end up having my contract straight with the client as well. They don't want to be a pass through um, at that point, so we can do it either way there. But the huge thing that I've learned is like you never work without a contract. Don't start work without a contract. Um, if the contract isn't signed, you can't kick off the project. You can't start working on it just to do them a favor, that kind of stuff. Bad things tend to happen. They don't always happen, but it just opens the door for uh, bad things to happen. And I remember somebody explained to me one time contracts don't exist because the people don't trust each other. Because, the way I like to do business, based on transparency and trust and honesty, but contracts aren't about trusting each other. And this was my mind was kind of blown when he told me. He's like, contracts are there to make sure that everybody's on the same page. They're about setting expectations. They're not about trust. So at the end of the day, make sure you have the contract before you start working, because the contract is what sets the expectations of how you're going to work together, what you're doing for them, what they do in return, paying you, how much, that kind of stuff. Everybody knows exactly what they're going to get, what they're going to do, and all of that stuff. And if you don't have the contract signed, you can't assume you have clarity and matching expectations.
It's all good points to hit. Yeah, like I cover a lot of the master services agreement, and I always have anybody sign a services agreement, period. And then like the idea of the MNDA or mutual NDA is part of my basic package. Um,
Yes.
and then it almost rolls out. It all goes out of my e-sign at the same time, so they can just roll through. I have tried to remove all the legalese that I can and just make it like this is my state law. I'm adhering to my state's laws. If you're in another state and you need something amended, tell me. I can amend some things, but frankly, since I am doing business in my state, these are here to protect me, and you're doing business in your state. I'm glad to add things or sign a mutual services agreement, which they take, some folks have to get lawyers involved. You take some of that, and then you get through that statement of work. That statement of work gets agreed upon. Again, this goes to that even part of that negotiation. That's where you say, I am going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and that's it. If there are other things that they ask you to do, hey, I need you to shoot me an amendment on the statement of work. I even know some companies that like add fees for changing a statement of work. Oh, you if you need a contract rewrite, not only am I if I'm doing more work, but just to amend the statement of work is another $400 or $125 per edition or some things like that. Because what they want to do is kind of discourage that. Like, hey, next time we'll just worry about it later, and next year we'll sign a different um, contract at a different time to finish that stuff in 6 months from now. Um, and then that's definitely like the way I see it. Master services, standard services, statement of work, and for me, right, too, the other thing that protects me is this thing of, as a again a pen tester is rules of engagement, and I won't even start the work even if the work was supposed to start a week ago if the person responsible, not necessarily a lawyer, necessarily whoever, but the person responsible ultimately, and in all of these documents you discover who's responsible, the person taking liability on their side. And if that person doesn't sign the rules of engagement, I will wait. I will sit around. I will send reminders. Hey, wait, have you started that work yet? No, because we don't have a rules of engagement. Even though I have a statement of work, which in some terms protects me, but as a pen tester, if I don't have a rules of engagement and what's in the rules of engagement, what I can and cannot do, not necessarily what I'm doing for them. That's business between the two business entities. But me as a hacker will not touch anything unless I have a clear, signed, dated rules of engagement on both sides. And that's for my protection because I have seen other even organizations that had, massive organizations, massive statements of work, blah 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 blah, doing something for a whole county, state, blah blah blah, and people still get arrested, and I need to avoid that.
That's usually good. Getting
Yeah.
arrested is usually not fun.
Well, and while you're doing your job, of all things.
And I sort of do something similar to that. My consulting is obviously a little bit different because it's more, governance, risk, compliance, VCISO, uh, advisory, that kind of thing. Uh, but one of the things that goes into my statement of work that is also not in my proposals is a section for in scope activities and out of scope activities. And in
Fair.
scope activities, I'll outline the types of things that are in scope during the project. And then in the out of scope section, I actually have like two things. I have things that are out of scope for, like, I still do them, but they're out of scope in this project because they require a specific scoped statement of work. So if I'm doing an assessment, for instance, I would list in the out of scope section creating policy documentation or something like that, because I'm not going to create documentation under an assessment SOW. We have to have a different SOW specific that is scoped for that other kind of project that I do. And I also have the hourly advisory stuff generally is also out of scope unless there is provisions in the statement of work that outlines hourly consulting in addition to the project work. And then I've
Yep.
defined these are the in scope activities for this project. These are the types of things that are in scope for advisory services uh, as well. And then I have things that are out of scope because I don't do them. Uh,
It's a good place to put it. Actually, it's a
Project
good point. Yeah.
management, program management, those types of things. Like, I'll manage my project of delivering the thing that I'm supposed to deliver in the SOW. What I'm not going to manage is an implementation project for the client to deploy some system or some new technology or, implement whatever it is. I'm not going to manage their program for them. Um, I also add in there things like incident response. I don't do incident response work. I've
Yep.
been
Yep.
there in my career. I am in a post emergency phase of my career. I am not interested in doing incident response work. If they have an issue while I'm working with them, I am happy to get them in touch with people who do that sort of thing. But I am not committing, like 100% not committing to jump on the battle bridge on Friday night or all weekend long and sit on the conference call, while people are doing the response stuff. um, just that's not what I do. So I call specific things that I don't do out of scope in that contract as well, because it's just a huge piece of just setting expectations. Like I said, for between me and the customer of what am I going to do in this project, but also just in general, what do I do and what do I not do? And under this particular agreement, like what do they have access to from me?
Very good point. Very good point. I
Yeah.
try to cover that in the rules of engagement from my perspective, but I never thought about that actually. It's a good point. Maybe I need to put a little bit more of that defining I will not be doing. If I cause an incident and the root cause analysis is me or I believe is me, I am a pen tester. It's not unheard of. I'm always willing to do a couple of those things for root cause purposes. Hey, did you touch this box? Give me a moment. I will do the research in my time. Get back, of course, expediently because I don't want to lose this client or have anything interrupted or have to go to my insurance or again potentially cause a lawsuit. But then you go, no, that was not us, and then they go, okay, cool, and then I step back. As much as like my problem solving brain wants to help them solve their problems, if you start touching things that are not in your statement of work, rules of engagement, and your agreement, you become liable for them.
Yep. Yeah, you don't get paid anymore for helping them test their incident response process
That's true.
if that
That's
was
true
not
as
already
well.
part of the plan.
You have a scope document for a reason. You have a rules of engagement for a reason. If you intentionally deviate from those documents, your coverage may not cover you.
And actually, that makes me think of another thing from the business perspective of not just don't work for free for other people for free, but don't let other people work for you for free.
Oh, absolutely. I refuse to
And
let
that
people do that. I've
that
been offered so many times, please let me work for you.
it sounds weird because you think, well, why if somebody's willing to just help me, why wouldn't I? And my take on this, and I've told people, when I've tried to bring in, you know, industry friends, to help on certain things, and they're like, oh, don't worry about it. Is basically, this is a business. Everybody has to make money in this. Like, if we're not all making money, then something's wrong. But
Yes.
the other piece of this that's more practical that I've learned with this is if you have somebody maybe who's you're bringing in as a subcontractor to help on a project, or somebody to do something for your business. Maybe you've got friends that would do um, I don't know, bookkeeping or social media management, or something. It could be anything that you would bring. But like if the friend's like, well, I'm going to give you this discount and that kind of stuff because we're friends, I caution folks against that. Um, because if somebody gives you a price that is not their normal market rates, if they have other work that they're doing, that other work is always going to take precedence over your
Yep.
work that
Yep.
you're waiting for them to do. And so like if somebody's doing work for me, I want to pay them what their normal rates are for that work, because I don't want my work to be deprioritized if I'm waiting on them to do some piece of a project. I don't want that to be deprioritized against their other clients. I want it to be prioritized in and done uh, you know at whatever time frame that we were expecting to do it. So that's one of the weird things that I was unexpected to learn about business, is not letting people work for you for free, and not letting people give you like the friends and family discount, because like you're going to end up lower on their priority list than if you were paying the full rate. That could interfere with your projects, and the last thing you want to do is have a deliverable to a client get delayed because somebody had to do something else for another one of their clients instead, and they didn't put in the time because the other client was paying more.
Yep. And then that can affect a relationship, the friendship, many
Yep.
things. Just don't do it. Make sure you are as much of a priority to them as you are, or as they to you, back and forth. Like, now if there's hey, you know what? You're helping each other out. If you've done a lot of work together, if you're friends for a long time, you can always think about it, but always make sure that they're getting rewarded enough that they feel that this is as prior to them as it is to you.
We ran longer than we expected to on this episode. There's a whole lot of stuff to cover, though. Uh, any like parting words, final thoughts, or anything, key takeaways that you want to mention, or anything for folks before we wrap up?
Not at the moment. As soon as these start coming out, and you guys have any questions, again, I'm available to answer as many questions as you got. Again, thank you for having me on the show. Looking at it, we've got at least two more maybe episodes, and I appreciate doing this. And I'm even learning some things and kind of revisiting. Maybe I'm going to take a few of these things a little bit stronger myself, even though I've been good for 4+ years of doing this the way I've been doing it. But I think now it's time that again, it's just the market, the way things are. Again, we started this conversation because of we saw bills and legislation, the PRO Act, Corporate Transparency Act, all these things that us as small business owners need to worry about. But I think that we've hit a lot of the good points, and I've gotten very positive feedback on these still. So always willing to answer from my perspective. Again, I have a different perspective than AC, and I have a different perspective than other business owners, but uh, I, I'm having a lot of fun doing this. So appreciate letting me come on the show and us getting to the bottom of helping folks do these things.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's been great having you here. Always good getting other people's perspectives and being able to draw from their experience as well in here. So I appreciate you being on and being willing to share and help teach. So it's something that obviously there's just a huge need, a huge hunger out there for this information. So
Agreed.
thanks everybody for listening as well. As always, we do this for you, the listeners out there. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And hopefully, if there's somebody that that will enjoy this or find this really useful, don't hesitate to share the episode or share the series with them as well, because we're doing this to try and help people. So that's it for this episode. I am Accidental CISO, and until next time, stay mindful.
Don't miss our next episode. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media. Visit Focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast for show information and links to our social media pages. This has been the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity.